Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for tuning in to The Ordinary Filmmaker. Subscribe to get notification of new videos like this one so you don't miss any news, rumors, gear reviews, or tutorials. And a big thanks to Atomos for sponsoring The Ordinary Filmmaker. I'm using the Ninja 5 external recorder for all my studio work, which saves me an awful lot of time in post. Want to speed up your editing? Use my links below to purchase your own Ninja. And now for a recap of this week's news. We started the week off with Canon RF lens embodiments for super telephoto and macro lenses, giving further credence to what lenses we'll see later this year. But just a day later, we got news that the Canon R1, Canon's flagship camera, won't be coming out in 2021, though a development announcement is expected soon. The Canon R1 isn't expected until 2022, and in a way this really kind of makes sense. The 1DX Mark III was released in January in time for what was supposed to be the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Now, with the Olympics postponed until this year, well, Sony took advantage and released the Alpha One, having the Olympics all to themselves. Well, not completely. I mean, we're still going to have the 1DX Mark III there, right? But still, the pressure is on Canon and Nikon to make an appearance. Will the R1 and the Z9 prototypes make an appearance? Well, that's what we're told. The same report mentioned that we get a surprise camera from Canon. No idea yet which camera that will be. Then later that day, we got a report that Canon will be releasing two cameras this week. Things started to get a little bit exciting, and then, just one day later, they did. But sadly, these weren't any of the cameras that we'd hoped to see. Canon instead released the CRN300, CRN500 PTZ cameras. Now, an achievement on their own with a breakthrough in price and capabilities. Things further heated up Wednesday. Canon rumors reported that the firmware update for the Canon R5, the R6, and the 1DX Mark III is in testing and will be released in the next several weeks. The R5 will get a bulk of the new features, but the R6 and the 1DX Mark III won't be left out. And this is good news. For the longest time, we were only hearing about the R5 getting a firmware update. Now, the R5 will get Canon Log 3, Cinema Raw Light, it'll get 120 frames per second in 1080, and I like this one, new 4K compression options. I'm really curious to know what compression options these are. Now, obviously, I'd love to see Apple ProRes, but I know I'm dreaming. Now, looking at the R6, it will get Canon Log 3 and new compression options, but no Cinema Raw Light. And the 1DX Mark III will get Cinema Raw Light and Canon Log 3. Then later that same day, Canon rumors reported that a cinema version of the R5, called the R5C, will be announced later this year and will be a minor version of the R5 in a cinema body. Sorry, not minor, mirror version of the R5 in a cinema body. Now, the R5C will be bigger, have active cooling, and the same image sensor, and that's a big deal, because that also means we're going to get the same recording options. At least that's according to the rumor. And of course, it's still going to have those same stills capabilities. So what I suspect is that the R5 will be what the FX3 is to the A7S III. Same capabilities, just in a different form factor. I look forward to hearing more about this camera. Now, on a personal note, Atomos sent me the Ninja 5. Now, I actually have been in discussions with them for several months on some sort of sponsorship agreement. I agreed to promote the Ninja 5 in return for giving me a Ninja 5. Now, I know what you're thinking. Simon, are you selling out? Are you just going to be a spokesperson for Atomos? No, not at all. And really, that's not fair to anyone, to you, to me, or even the sponsor. The reason I reached out to Atomos and suggested the agreement is I strongly believe in the product. Think back to last year, late summer. You've all heard me rave about it. And you can see from my affiliate links, and I can see from my affiliate links that you do too. There are some products that I've fallen in love with. I know what you're thinking. Simon, are you selling out? Are you just going to be a spokesman for Atomos? No, that's not my style, and really that's not fair to anyone. Now, the reason I reached out to Atomos and suggested the agreement is, well, I strongly believe in the product. I've been recommending it for, well, you've all heard me rave about it since late last summer. And then, of course, I got to review it for 2 weeks, and I fell in love with it. And I can see from my affiliate links that many of you like it too. Now, there are some products that I have fallen in love with. The Ninja 5 for one, the Crane 2S gimbal, the Glide Gear teleprompter, Angelbird products, the R5, and the A7S III, to name a few. Now, I am using the Ninja 5 every day. It's becoming second nature to me. I've always given you my unvarnished opinion along with a dash of humor in everything I cover. And the Ninja 5 won't be any different. And using it every day gives me the opportunity to review it in detail, to find those awkward things and communicate them to you. And like when I did the review and I had it for about 3 weeks, I noticed a few things and I conveyed those settings. And sometimes it's just being aware of something and then knowing how to change it to make life easier. And in this version, they've updated the firmware to the point where some of those issues that I discovered, well, not 2 weeks ago, several months ago, are gone and fixed. So I'm really happy to hear that, or really happy to see that. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is just simply to be transparent. And I changed my intro to be clear. When I had the A7S III, I loved it. I loved that it didn't have record limits, no overheat modes, and that you could charge it over USB without buying additional hardware, essentially saving you $500 over the R5. But even the A7S III had some, well, I wouldn't say issues, but I found myself wanting an external recorder due to the high cost of storage, limited storage capacities, and to get the best video quality or image quality right off the sensor regardless of what mode I chose. Now the Ninja 5 saves me a lot of time and allows me to edit 940 megabits per second 4K video. Let me just say that again, 940 megabits per second 4K video on a 2015 MacBook Pro, and to do it with ease. So if you shoot a lot of video, I highly recommend the Ninja 5, especially if time matters. And besides the other capabilities that I mentioned, it also provides a larger screen with awesome exposure tools like waveforms, vector scopes, and false colors, allowing me to take my work to the next level. Got any questions or have any issues with the Ninja 5? Well, reach out to me in the comment section down below. I'd like to know more about your experiences. And if you like staying informed and learning about camera gear, subscribe and choose all notifications to get notified as soon as I publish a video. But now, it's time to answer your questions. Got a question for next week's video? Post it in the comment section down below, and I might just be answering your question next week. And now, for our first question. Nikon asks, will the 8K RAW 16-bit being pushed to various TV, electronic, and camera video companies as the new standard? Will the laptops be bottlenecks going forward, as most laptops, even from 2020, had serious issues handling 8K? All right, that's got to be the toughest questions I've had so far, not because of the content, but that is one really long run-on sentence. Anyhow, grammar aside, I've edited 8K video, and I got to tell you, I didn't find it all that difficult, but it's like anything. If you know the workarounds, it can be quite simple. Now, if you take 8K video right out of the R5, or let alone forget 8K RAW, if you take 4K, 4K with C-Log, it's 940 megabits per second. Even my iMac Pro had trouble. But if you take those formats and you convert them to Apple ProRes, or as I'm using the Ninja 5 and I'm just recording, dumping out an Apple ProRes 422, you can edit those video files like butter. Now, I haven't tried I haven't tried 8K RAW, but I have tried those other modes, and I edit it perfectly fine. And give you an idea here, I'm using a 2015 MacBook Pro to edit these videos, and that's using C-Log, so 940 bits per second. I haven't tried 8K yet, and there's a good reason for that. The real issue isn't necessarily processing. And yes, there are computers you can get out there. If you look at some of these MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs, the new M1 processors, everyone's raving about them and how they can easily edit 4K video. But I do want to caution you there. While you can edit 4K video on these machines, they just don't have enough RAM to prevent the machines from, heavily using the SSD, wearing them down a little sooner. So because I'm a heavy user of video, I'm going to wait for the MacBook Pro, see what it has, and try to get a machine with a minimum of 16 gigabytes, but hopefully 32 gigabytes. But when it comes to editing 8K, as your question asks, the processor bottleneck is not what I noticed. The biggest problem I noticed was storage. You need a ton of it. When I started my channel, Nikan, I think it was probably, 14, 15 months ago, I was shooting with a Canon 70D in 1080p. And for the longest time, I would keep my files. I was using a 2 terabyte Samsung Evo drive, and I kept about 6 months worth of videos. And then I started trimming them after that, so I keep the last 6 months and then delete everything else. Well, as soon as I got the R5, I could only keep a week's worth. And now, with a 4 terabyte, I can still only keep a week's worth of videos. the amount of storage you're going to need is crazy. Now, if you're using some compression modes, like the A7S III is terrific for the compression modes. Sony does a terrific job of compressing video without it looking terrible. And I've seen some compression modes that just look absolutely terrible, but the Sony does a really great job. But for me, because I like to do a lot of editing, I like to do color grading, I like to use effects, I want as much data. I want to be able to determine in post how much data I want to keep. So capturing in Apple ProRes 422 is very important to me. I find that with Apple ProRes 422, I'm not losing any detail from what's coming out of the Canon R5. Now, I could shoot an Apple ProRes RAW, but I just don't see the benefit of going to that high level. And the storage is just absolutely crazy. You can do the math yourself. Think of 940 megabits per second. And if you do 8K, you're doing a minimum of 1200 megabits per second, and up to as high as I think 32 megabits per second. Your storage needs are huge. A 4 terabyte SSD is barely enough space for just one project. And to give you an idea, this video that I put out probably about a month ago now, it's 10 minutes long. The entire thing was shot in 8K, all I, but not RAW. The video file, the project file, that's everything, music, which doesn't take up a lot of space, all the files, everything, excluding the rendered project, was half a terabyte in size. It's half a terabyte. Now, when I exported to using the YouTube presets in, Compressor. The file size was 24 gigabytes. That was the final product. That's just astonishing. So the biggest issue I really see is storage. There's no workaround with storage. I mean, yes, you can use IPB and some of these other modes, but once you get into editing, you really do want to have a codec. You want to convert these files to a codec that makes editing smoother. So I think storage is the biggest issue with, like I said, with your computer. If you convert them to Apple ProRes, or if you're not using Apple, still, even if you use Adobe Premiere, they can take Apple ProRes. Same with DaVinci Resolve. But if you're an Avid fan, well, again, record in, Avid QNHD or XD. I can't remember. That one I can, for whatever reason, I can never remember it. But yeah, storage is you're really going to be your biggest problem. 181 Uplift asks, out of camera without shooting in C-Log, I can edit footage great. I love the idea of editing C-Log footage and coloring, but the files kill my computer. Is this where you suggest the Ninja 5? Do you use your Ninja for non-C-Log? I'm trying to get a better picture why I should drop $900 on the Ninja and SSD if it's just doing non-C-Log. Well, I'm going to keep this one relatively short because I think I answered a lot of this in the previous question, but let me sum up for you and answer your question very succinctly. Yes, I use the Ninja 5 for all my studio work because I get Apple ProRes. So let me explain where I saved a lot of time. Now, this video usually takes anywhere from 60 to 70 minutes of shoot time. And then I have to copy it over onto my computer, and that takes an additional, depending on what storage I'm using, 10 to 20 minutes. And then I have to decide, do I transcode? Do I convert it to Apple ProRes? Well, it depends on the project that I'm working on, and that can take another 40 minutes. And of course, if I'm not transcoding, then the file is going to drop frames all the time. And of course, when I go to export, the export time is going to be longer than if I'd be using Apple ProRes 422. So sometimes I just choose to convert to Apple ProRes 422. And for me, because this is a hobby, it's not a big deal. I'll have it convert to Apple ProRes 422. I'll leave it. I'll come back in an hour or two, and it's good to go. But if time matters for you, this is where the Ninja 5 really comes in. Because I'm able to choose my recording codec, the one that works well for editing, I don't have to transcode. And because I can edit right off the SSD, there's no transferring times at all. And that's a huge benefit right there. So I choose to output in Apple ProRes 422 based on the R5 that I'm using. That is what I found to offer me the best quality. So as soon as I finish pressing the recording button, or after I finish shooting and I stop the recording, all I do is I take the SSD out of the back of the Ninja. I don't have it here, but I have a cable. I just use a simple SSD caddy, plug it into the back of the SSD, plug it into my Mac, and I start editing. I don't have to copy the file. I edit the files where it is. And on this type of video, I can easily save 3 hours of my time. But I want to list off a whole bunch of benefits that I get from the Ninja 5 that really make my life a whole lot easier. So the one thing is, with the Canon R5, I don't have to worry about any record limits. I don't have to worry about overheat limits. So when I'm recording, I'm talking to you, even though I can look up and I can see that I'm approximately at 18 minutes of record time, I don't have to worry about running out of storage. I don't have to worry about any timers or anything. I can just focus on the content. I can get absorbed and focused in the moment and delivering the answers to your questions and focusing on reading what I need to read to get the information out to you. And that is very powerful. Other benefits include storage. CF Express cards, V90 cards, CF Express cards type A or B are very expensive compared to SSDs. So you can get much cheaper storage. A 1 terabyte SSD, they can be had for around $100 for a decent quality, and then you can go up in there depending on what type of work you're shooting. And you know, the ability to just interchange storage like that for much cheaper is really beneficial, especially when it comes to cameras like the A7S III. Well, they don't have overheat limits and record limits. Storage is very expensive. 160 gigabytes will run you $400. And V90 cards aren't that much cheaper. So you save a lot of money in storage there. You don't have any of the transcoding time. You don't have any of the So that's a big thing too, transcoding time. Once I take the SSD out of the computer, I don't have to copy it. I can edit right off the SSD, so that saves me transfer time and transcoding time. So that's another big benefit. What else? Faster export. So once I'm done with my project, I notice my export times were about 40% quicker. So all these time savings help me get my news out there a whole lot quicker and compress the amount of time that I have to spend doing this. And if you've got a lot of work, that really saves a lot of time. But also, here's another thing to think of too. If you're going to be shooting outside, then having exposure tools like waveforms and vector scopes, false colors, really make a huge difference. And you've got a larger screen. That 5-inch screen makes a huge difference. And look, when I had the R5 and the A7S III, I looked at them side by side, and the Canon LCD was a little bit bigger, and it made a bit of a difference. But when it comes to shooting video, I don't find that the LCD on the R5 is any more helpful than the A7S III. They're both too small. Neither one allows me to properly tell if I'm focused or if I'm exposed properly, even with the various tools that those cameras offer. But a larger screen, a 5-inch screen, with vector scopes, waveforms, allows me to take it to the next level. So there are many benefits. So yes, whenever I'm shooting in the studio, I'm always using the Ninja, regardless of whether I'm shooting C-Log or not. Now, one thing you might want to do, yes, $900 is a lot of money, and maybe what you do is you just start off getting it bits and pieces. Just get the Ninja 5, and if you actually wait for Black Friday, Atomos usually drops the price by about 20%. So you can get it for $499. Now that comes with the unit itself, but it doesn't come with an SSD, it doesn't come with any batteries, but it does come with an AC adapter, and that's what I'm using here because I just don't want to have to deal with batteries. Using the AC adapter, if you're in a rush, you don't have to worry about if the battery's properly charged, you're good to go. So that's what I use for both my camera and the Ninja. And then maybe take one of your 1 terabyte SSDs or one of your 512 gigabyte SSDs that you got something else, use it for a little while, and save up a bit of money, and then get yourself a 1 terabyte. Because I really think that, yeah, once you get it, see, when I first started this channel, when I first got the R5 which is more accurate, a lot of people said, Simon, get the Ninja 5, you're going to love it. And I looked into it and I thought, wow, there are an awful lot of selling features here, but I didn't quite get it. Until you actually have it in hand, you don't realize how powerful a tool this is. And I'd say the biggest benefit you get from this tool is not image quality in any way. It's really the time savings. It's all about time. And that in itself makes a huge difference. Yes, you've got the tools. Yes, you've got the image quality, but time matters. It's the one thing we have very little control over in our lives. Cloud Strife asks, what are good video cameras for filming weddings? Ones that won't overheat throughout the day. Well, this is a really good question, but I'm going to hand this one over to Moving Matt. Tom?
Hey everyone, welcome to Moving Matt, where I'm actually sitting most of the time. So, Triple O Cloud Strife, you were wondering what are some good video cameras for filming weddings? Ones that won't overheat throughout the day. Wow, throwing some shade at the R5 in your question, I see. Dang, I can't believe you're doing that. I'm just kidding, Cloud Strife. That is actually a very good and valid question, because reliability in a wedding video camera is what I would consider one of the most important things, right up there with image quality. When it comes to reliability with a wedding or event style camera, I personally feel there are 3 boxes you want to check. No overheating, or at least unlikely to overheat, is one of the boxes for sure. I think it is worth pointing out that in certain conditions, pretty much any camera can technically overheat, so try to avoid putting your camera on a trampoline directly in the Florida sun. The other box I think you should try to check is to make sure it has dual recording for video. So I would look for cameras that have dual SD slots capable of dual recording. Now there is a workaround with the Ninja 5 recorder, but I will touch on that in a bit. I know not everyone would put dual recording as a must, but I personally don't want to be in a position where I have to ask a bride to redo their wedding. I highly doubt that will go over well. The third box that I would say is a little less important because there's kind of an easy workaround, but still worth noting, and that is having a camera with a good battery life. Of course, you can always carry more batteries, but I still think it's something that you would want to pay attention to when you're making your selection. Now that I've went over those criterias, I will give some actual recommendations, but now because you have those in mind, if I don't pick a camera that works for you, you can always use that as kind of a guideline. So since I have limited information about you and your budget, I'm going to have to make some assumptions based on the way you phrase your question. I'm going to assume you're looking for a mirrorless or a DSLR style body and you aren't wanting to go for a heavier cinema camera. So for that reason, I will only mention a few cinema cameras that are reasonably compact, and I will touch on those really quick first. The first cinema camera I will mention is the Sony FX6. It is reasonably small when it comes to cinema cameras. The image quality is great and it has excellent low light. Has internal ND filters, which is a huge plus when it comes to video work. Also, being a cinema camera, it has pretty much every type of connector you would want. The downside would be, though it is reasonably priced for a cinema camera, it is still up there. It does not have IBIS, although no cinema camera with ND filters that I know of does, so I mean, it's kind of not a big deal. And also, if you're used to a DSLR style body, it doesn't really fit that bill. The next camera, sticking with Sony, would be the FX3. The pros are, it has pretty much the same image quality as the FX6. It is much smaller and lighter, it is considerably cheaper, and although I wouldn't consider it a hybrid camera, if you're in a pinch, you could snap a few pictures if you needed. And also, it does have IBIS. Now the cons of the FX3 is that it has no ND filters, and it does have a cheap, not very bright screen, so if you're shooting in the sun, it will be a disadvantage and you may need an external monitor anyway. And also it is lacking false color and other wave formats, so again, you may want an external monitor if that's something important to you. The last cinema camera recommendation I'll give is the Canon C70. Personally, I love the look of this camera, and if you're used to a mirrorless body, then you will feel right at home. Some of the pros are it has a dual gain sensor that will give you great dynamic range and also some really good low light. It also has a fully touchable flip screen that looks excellent and has all the different wave formats. And of course the Canon colors are always easy to work with, and it also has a lot of amazing legacy glass along with the high quality RF glass. Cons are that it is Super 35, and with the RF mount, that means you have to do a lot of conversions. The autofocus is a little older, so it has face detect, but not the eye autofocus. And again, it's priced reasonably for a cinema camera, but it's still up there at $5,500 US. Okay, so moving on from the cinema cameras, the Canon 1DX Mark II and III are both great options. They have very high quality video and are built like tanks. Also, they are great for hybrid capabilities, and I'm sure you can find a good 1DX Mark II used at a decent price. The cons I'd give them are the screens are small and dated, and you'd also be getting the older EF mount, so if you're wanting to go with the mirrorless system and get the new RF mount, that isn't going to be the best option. Moving on, we have the Sony A1, which is a pretty incredible camera. Some may be quick to point out that the 8K can overheat too, but overall it seems to have better recovery times. Also, just using the photography mode won't start the overheating process. On top of all that, its pixel bending 4K seems to be pretty high quality. Of course not as good as the R5 4K HQ, but again it doesn't overheat. It also has the dual video recording along with no annoying record limits. It has incredible photo capabilities as well if you're needing to shoot hybrid. Now the cons are it is very expensive and still has a very cheap screen, but if you're shooting in bright conditions, it does have an amazing EVF that can kind of help mitigate that problem. Now moving on and stepping down in price, we have the Sony A7S III. You probably know pretty much everything about it. I mean, pretty much the entire internet does. But basically, it has the same video capabilities as the FX3, and even though it is a 12 megapixel sensor, if you don't have to crop a lot, it can be good enough for some stills, especially considering the new Adobe upscaling software if you just have to have a bigger image. The cons are it still has that very cheap screen, but it also has that amazing EVF. Moving down the list again and going even cheaper, you have the Sony A7 III. Overall, it is still a pretty great camera and it does have that dual recording, but it is a little dated at this point and it doesn't have the upgraded colors, so personally, I don't love the colors as much as I would in the Canons. And I've also heard a little bit about some overheating, but I don't think it's as prevalent as the older Sony cameras were. But if possible, maybe wait for the Sony A7 IV. From there, I'll just lump in the Canon EOS R5, R6, and even the EOS R with a Ninja recorder. You can get around the dual recording with that, and also you don't have to worry about the overheating. Although I'm really not sure if the overheating will occur if you're recording internally and externally at the same time, so maybe check into that a little more yourself before you go down that path. Also, now we are hearing about a new Canon R5C, which sounds pretty incredible, but it's not going to be coming till next year if the rumors are true. So that winds up my recommendations, and I am aware that I didn't even touch on the Nikon Z6 Mark II or any of their high-end DSLR cameras, but this is already getting pretty long, and I'm not very familiar with Nikon, and I'm sure that NickCan and others can give you a better rundown of those in the comments. So anyway, I hope you have found this helpful, and be sure to check the comments because I am sure there's going to be more recommendations and probably a few people telling you how wrong I am. To everyone, thank you for welcoming me back, and until next time, back to you, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Tom. And now for our next question. Sammy Lapp asks, what RF lenses do you have? Well, Sammy, I've got 3 RF lenses. I've got the 50mm f1.2, the 800mm f11, and the 24-105 f4. But let me tell you a little bit about each one. The 50mm is what I'm filming with right now. And it's expensive. It's around, I think it's around $23.99 US. I spent about 3,000 Canadian on it. And it's not a cheap lens. And if you're thinking about buying this lens, I want to caution you. Now, while it is very sharp, it's a great improvement over the EF version. But if you shoot a lot of video, well, it's got a loud focus motor. And it does make a difference. Now, last year when I was shooting outside, I would use my 50mm. And with a shotgun mic on top, I wouldn't hear the focus motor. So I was able to use it to pick up more of the ambient sounds to add more depth to my videos. But the 50mm, it's loud. It's too loud, so I have to record that audio off of the camera, and it's just a bit of a pain. In hindsight, I kind of wish I had kept the EF 50mm f1.2. And if you're interested in the 50mm, you can pick up the EF version for quite cheap. I think you can get them for around $600 US or less. And both provide really good stills for portraits, and it's just truly incredible what this lens can provide. But, you know, if you're primarily video, you might want to consider the EF version, but you can see what I've been shooting with, and this is my main lens for the channel, and it does produce very, very good results. I'm using a Tascam mic on me here, so I really don't have to worry about any focus motor sounds coming out. But if you do put a microphone on top of the camera, it's something to consider. But just remember, for the extra sharpness and benefits you get out of the RF version, if you're starting out, consider getting a used EF version, and you might be better off. The next lens I want to talk about is the 24-105. I got the f4 version. It costs a little bit more, but as far as lenses go, it's not that expensive. One thing I like about the 24-105, it's an L series, which means it's weather sealed. And let's face it, if you're going to be buying this lens, it's probably going to be your general purpose lens. It's going to be your travel lens. It's going to be the lens you use when you're just out and about. And I like it. It's got f4 throughout the entire focal range, so there's better low light performance as well. It's not the lens I use the most. I believe it or not, even when I'm out shooting family stuff, I like to take the 50mm with me. And what I'll usually do is mic up myself and my son. It's a little bit annoying. It's not as much fun as putting on the 24-105 with a shotgun mic. It's a much more of a carefree environment, and I really do like that lens. But the other lens, the 800mm, this is the most fun, the most enjoyable lens I've ever had. This is video that I shot with the 800mm, and look how close I am at the moon here. I mean, this is incredible. Look at how many seconds. I don't have anything on the camera to rotate the lens. This is just, this movement here is coming from the rotation of Earth itself. And look at that. Look how close I'm in. Look at the detail in the craters. It's just truly amazing. And I got this shot of several birds I shot last December. I'm told that if you give the half-truth, you're lying, so I need to let you know something here. I also bought the RF 2x extender. And so for the moonshot and the birds, no, sorry, for the moonshot, I've got the 2x extender on, but for the birds, I'm not. A 2x extender is very expensive. I mean, it's the same price as just 24 to 105, but when you look at other extenders, it's definitely not cheap. But if you're shooting stuff like the moon or Saturn and Jupiter, or you want to get and you're off in a marsh and you want to get the birds up close on a sunny day, it's a really, really good lens. It's a lot of fun. I don't know that I could recommend it for professionals, but for ordinary filmmakers and photographers, buy this lens. You're not going to regret it. And I rarely say that to you. I really suggest you go out and do your research, try things out yourself. But I can honestly say, get the 800mm, not the 600mm, get the 800mm. You're going to love it. It's not very heavy. It's an awful lot of fun. It's probably going to be the most fun you have with a camera and lens combination. Now, with that being said, I do have some EFS lenses that I use. So I'm using the EF to RF adapter on the camera as well. And I've got the 10 to 18mm as well as the 18 to 135mm USM. Stop the FOMO asks, in terms of YouTube content production and direction, where do you want to be 2 years from now, assuming you have 100,000 subscribers? You know, that's a very good question because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Forget where I want to be in 2 years. Where do I want to start to pivot right now? I'm ready for that next stage. And last night, I was looking at not ordinary filmmaker, Everyday Dad. And I used to watch him quite a bit. And when I was watching him probably about a year ago, I think he was somewhere around 80,000, 60,000 subscribers. And I looked at him the other day and I thought, wow, first of all, his thumbnails jumped out. He's producing videos almost every other day. And unlike me, they're not news items that don't take long to produce. He's doing review videos. And the thumbnails look terrific. And he's up to 300,000 subscribers. So what I'm thinking about, and I've got to really try to figure out how to do this because I love covering the news and I really don't want to get away from that. With my full-time job, and I do have a full-time job. Yesterday I was working right up till 6:30 and I didn't have much time for anything else, and doing full-time reviews is difficult to do. So I still want to focus on the news, but I want to look at a way of making things a little bit more polished, continuing to improve my presentation skills, continuing to deliver in a better way, in an informative way, and to add a little bit more humor. I'm not Casey from Camera Conspiracies, but still, I want to have fun with this. So I'm not sure what the plan's going to look like, but that's kind of the strategic direction. That's the conceptual level of where I want to go. And because my day job, I'm an enterprise architect, I'm borrowing off the enterprise architecture framework, the ADM, the architecture development methodology. And the first thing is thinking very conceptual, very high level. What is the direction? Does my vision still work? And yes, it does. What about my goals and objectives? Well, I like my goals and my objectives, but I think I need to remove some because I've achieved them and add some others or provide more details around some of them, such as improving my presentation. You'll notice in the last couple of videos or the last couple of weeks, I've now got sidebars that I put beside me that provide more information when I'm getting into a lot of detail. And I think the use of carefully scripted graphics work. Now we can look at shows, what is it? HBO has some shows. Well, let's talk about all the late night hosts. That English guy, he used to be on that show that I can't remember with that guy. I can't remember the names of this, but I'll probably put it in a sidebar or something. But these guys heavily use picture-in-picture graphics. They use sidebars and various things to tell their stories. And look, these guys seem to do very well. So I do like following the format of late night talk show where, you know, I have a little bit of an entry-level monologue where I provide a brief background. I get some news, and you'll notice I have a regular occurring piece now called Behind the Scenes. And what Behind the Scenes allows me to do is, it's kind of like a talk show. It allows me to transition to that next section. And people who want the news, great, you've got it, and they don't want anything else. It's pretty clear to them that now you can jump out and you don't have to wait for anything else. You're not going to miss anything. So behind the scenes, I don't introduce any news. And behind the scenes is very much that. I talk about things behind the scenes that I do on the channel. I talk about sponsorship. I talk about issues. But I also talk about other things. I do rants. I might do updates to the spring challenge. It gives me the freedom to explore without ruining the rest of the format. So I really like the behind the scenes piece. And one day I might even rename it to something else. Do you have an idea of what I could rename it to? I really love your input. And by the way, stop the FOMO. I really love your channel. And I've left some comments before, but the problem is we both get so many comments that by the time one of us either responds, we've probably missed the comment because there's so many ahead of it. But I'd love to actually collaborate with you at some point, whether it's just a simple interview piece or something. But yeah, I'm really interested. I really respect the work you do, and I think you do a terrific job. And I love the questions you provide weekly on this channel. Alex asks, Canon was supposed to be announcing the R5s and the R7 in Q1. There are just under 2 weeks to go. Is it totally off the table now? And when do you believe will be a realistic date for these announcements going forward? Yeah, Alex, I don't really have any dates. Things are really in a constant state of flux. Canon had some significant issues this year with production, and what I think these really boil down to is not issues they had with solving problems in design and architecture. It's well known. Bloomberg put out a report talking about how semiconductors are so constrained this year that we also had the AKM semiconductor fire. So I believe that all these problems caused an issue for Canon, so a lot of things have gotten pushed. These are all the camera bodies right here that we're supposed to be getting this year. And you can see there's a long list of them. Now, I do believe some of these are going to get pushed into 2022. Now, I'm not going to call it the R7 because it might not be called the R7. We will have an R7, but I think what generally happens with the naming that Canon uses is that you start, one, with being the highest, most powerful camera in terms of capabilities, and it goes down from there. So the R6 is a full-frame mirrorless camera, and I do believe we're going to get some other cameras that are full-frame and mirrorless, like the replacement to the RP, and a camera that's not quite a replacement to the EOS R, but similar. And I would expect them to get the R7 and the R8 moniker. So the camera that you refer to as the R7, I think, is an APS-C camera, an R system APS-C camera, and I believe that's going to be called the R9. So let's talk about those three cameras without using the monikers. The replacement to the EOS RP and the EOS R Mark II, those were supposed to be coming this year. And I haven't heard if that's changed or not. I would say, you know, there's a 50-50 chance we'll get them in the the second half of this year or the first half of next year. And the APS-C camera, well, it's been reported to be out in testing again. It's possible for the second half of this year. The R1 we now know is going to be in the second half of 2022. It's just really hard to say. So as I do hear more, I'm always putting out videos. What I try to do is put out a video with a single theme. Now yesterday I put out 2 videos. I could have put out a single video. Now there's 2 reasons why I put them out in separate videos. One, when you guys search for stuff, it's so much easier that if you look at a thumbnail and you know what it's about. When I cover off 4 different things, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Plus, because I'm editing on a 2015 MacBook Pro, I was able to shoot the firmware update very quickly and edit it and get that out the door within an hour. Then I had 2 hours to edit the second video, which was over 10 minutes, and took a lot more time to edit and get out the door. So those are those reasons. But I am doing my best. As soon as I hear any information on any of these cameras, you can guarantee that I'll have a video. So make sure you subscribe and choose all notifications. And one thing you might also want to do too, I'm piloting ordinaryfilmmaker.com, and that's a new notification system. So if the YouTube notification system isn't that accurate, you don't always get notifications, sometimes they come late, consider using that one because it's instant. And so far in the first 2 weeks of a soft launch, all but one have come within the first minute. Waytex says, Canon R5 12-bit RAW versus the Sony Alpha One 8.6K oversampled 8K. 8K RAW footage captures and retains its details, colors, and dynamic range. But in terms of sharpness, can it outperform the A1 8.6K oversampled 8K? I've seen people color grade their RAW footage, but it looks less refined than all-I or IPB footage. What's your take on it? Oh, this is a really good question. Now, sadly, I don't have the R1, so I haven't been able to try it out. And I don't trust what I see on the YouTube videos because, well, YouTube's compressing it. I find the commentary where somebody like Tony or DP Review will actually go ahead and say, this is what we've noticed, because you can't see it by looking at it. The compression's pretty significant. So here's what we know. 8.6K oversampled 8K is going to capture more detail. Now, if you're recording that in IPB or all-I, well, as you point out, you might not get as much dynamic range. You're going to get softer colors. So you'll get the detail, but the detail isn't going to be that great. I kind of harken it back to when I bought one of these $200 1080p cameras about 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, it was 1080p. It captured 1080p worth of detail, but it was terrible. The resolution essentially gave me what was half that resolution that seemed to be upscaled. Now, I'm not saying that with either of these two cameras. I think 8K RAW provides you with a lot of detail, but 8.6K RAW or 8.6K oversampled 8K is going to provide you a bit more detail, but I think both of these are going to give you really good results. Now, in terms of sharpness, if you're shooting in 8K RAW and you're doing it a lot, now you can play around and post a little bit, and this is where what we shoot and what we end up with is always very different. We're always going to color grade. We're always going to balance in post. And in some of my videos, I'll often add a little bit of sharpness. It's maybe only 2.5%. Now, I'm not doing it in this video, and I haven't done it in a long time, but depending on what I'm shooting, I might add a little bit of sharpness. So you can always add a tiny bit of sharpness to make the detail pop a little bit more. But I think both of these cameras produce a really good job. But without having them side by side, it's really hard to say. Now, again, what you're seeing on YouTube is going to vary very differently. And what I would try to do is, for those people who are saying, yes, you know what, the Sony's really great, but I find the Canon to be a little bit softer, reach out to them. Ask them if they can provide you with some sample files so you can see what the footage actually looks like right out of the camera. And that's what's really important. If I was looking at making a purchase for the Sony Alpha One or the Canon R5 and it was based on 8K video, the one thing I would want to do is get some sample files. And some people out there do provide it. In my video right here where I talk about, or I shot entirely in 8K, I provided one of the sample clips in 8K so you can actually see the level of detail, unedited, shot in C-Log. And our last question is from Man-Friendly Church. Most comparative reviews say that lenses from mirrorless cameras are better than their DSLR equivalents. Is this because they're nearer to the sensor with no mirror in the way? Because they're a newer design or something else? I don't like these general statements that people provide because they're an oversimplification. Now, Paul, what I really think is happening here is if you look at mirrorless versus DSLR, you really need to look at the platform. So if you're looking at Sony, for example, how long have they been in mirrorless? So with Sony, it's easy to say that, yes, Sony's mirrorless lenses are going to be better than the lenses they developed for DSLRs. Why? Well, because they've been doing mirrorless for so long and the advancements in technology over the last 10 years alone is significant. So of course, mirrorless lenses for Sony cameras is going to be that much better. And let's take a look at Canon. Now, Canon's only been making mirrorless, well, actually, they've been making mirrorless cameras for quite a bit of time too, but mostly on APS-C. They didn't really commit fully to mirrorless until they came out with the EOS R, and even that camera was much behind the times. It really wasn't that we, as customers, started to notice the difference from Canon in 2020 with the EOS R5 and R6, and now we can see that Canon is doubling down, they're developing, they're innovating, and they're producing cameras that compete well with Sony and others. But let's take a look at the lenses here, because this oversimplification, while it might be true that yes, mirrorless lenses are better, I would never say that. So let's take a look at a couple of lenses. Let's look at the 70-200. Now the RF version of this lens is 1 pound lighter. So it's better in terms of light. And also, because it's a telescopic, well, I wouldn't say it's telescopic. What you do is you rotate it, you extend it, and you lock it, and it won't work unless you put it in that lock position. And what that allows you to do as a professional photographer going from scene to scene is it only takes up one slot in your camera bag. So now you can fit more stuff in there. So you've got a size benefit. So we've got improvements in size and weight. Now let's take a look at the Canon 24-105 f4. Now this lens is about a centimeter smaller, so it's smaller in size. It's also a little bit smaller in weight, but this lens provides much better optics than the EF version. So what you can see with mirrorless is you can quite often see an improvement in optics, you can see an improvement in size, and you can see an improvement in weight. All three factors make a huge difference. But that doesn't mean that the mirrorless version, or in this case the RF version, is that much better or is better for you than a DSLR version. And I'm going to pick on the 50mm. Let's look at the RF 50mm f1.2 L series lens from Canon. It's $3,000 Canadian, so that probably puts it around $2,200 US, and it's very sharp. It's sharp from the edges to the center through much of the focal range, much better optics than the EF version. If you're a photographer, this is a terrific lens, but it doesn't make it better than the EF version, not for my scenario. In fact, as I told you earlier, because the focus motor is louder, I wish I still had the EF version of that lens, because I can put a shotgun mic on there, I can shoot stuff with a 50mm, and it's not going to pick up the focus motor focusing. And for video in general, you can buy this lens for about $600 less, sorry, $600 US or less. So you're able to spend a whole lot less and still get really incredible capabilities. So there's many factors that make up which lens is better. It's really got nothing to do with how close it is to the sensor. There's so many other variables going on. For example, being closer to the sensor doesn't necessarily mean it's going to weigh less, or it's going to have better optics, or it's going to be cheaper or more expensive. There's so many things that come into play here. And also there's things such as focus breathing, like the 50mm f1.2. I didn't really look into focus breathing when I looked at buying this camera, because really for the type of video work I shoot, it doesn't matter. But the focus breathing on the 50mm f1.2, it's significant. It really is huge. My 24-105 is so much better when it comes to focus breathing. In fact, the 24-105, you really would be hard-pressed to notice any focus breathing whatsoever. So are mirrorless lenses better than the DSLR counterparts? Yeah, most of the times they are, but not for the reasons that we might think. It's quite often for various different factors that I've mentioned. But sometimes those DSLR lenses ported over can do a really great job. And look, I'm still using EFS lenses on my R5. Cheap lenses. I picked the 10 to 18mm up for $120 US. Remember, these are creative tools. They allow you to capture light in a certain way, in a certain look. So yeah, be careful with thinking that just mirrorless lenses are better. Like I did with the 50mm, I thought it's going to be better, and it is. But a lot of the people reviewing it really didn't talk to it from a video standpoint. And that was one of the biggest problems when I looked at buying it, is I really wasn't too happy with how they reviewed it from a video standpoint. And now that I have it, yes, it does produce really great results. I'm very happy with it in the studio. But outside, I'm going to have to pick up the EF 50mm f1.2. But that brings us to the end of another week's full of questions. Now, I do have several things I want to talk to you in behind the scenes. So the first item I want to talk to you in behind the scenes is the Spring Challenge. I've gotten 5 entries, and I'm looking for more. So keep in mind, take a look at this video, because I talk about the prizes. I talk about how I'm going to give away the prizes and what you have to do. And it's very simple. All you have to do is create a video that in your mind's eye captures spring. And I don't care what that means to you. Whatever spring means to you, whether you're in the tropics or in the Arctic, shoot at least a 30-second video. Put it together, and then in that video, drop a comment, because I'm only looking in that video for comments, so I get so many comments every day. And then I will showcase it in one of my videos. And then once we turn over into April, starting April the 1st, I'm going to grab all the videos together, and what I'm going to do, what I plan on doing, is getting you to vote on the top 5. Because Google pretty well limits, or YouTube limits me to a poll with 5 videos in it, and I'm going to put them up there, and I'm going to let you vote on which is the best video. And I think I'll probably let the poll be there for a good 5 days, and then I'll announce the winner. And I'll grab your personal information, such as your address, your name, and your phone number. We'll do that privately through Facebook, so that way you don't have to worry about giving your private personal information. And I'll send it off to Angelbird, and they'll ship you out a 512 gigabyte CF Express card, Type B, along with a CF Express card reader. So that covers off the Spring Challenge. I've had a lot of great videos, and right at the end of this video, if I've got time, what I'm going to do is take all the videos right now, and I'm going ahead and put them back to back. Now, if I can identify if it's YouTube music playing, I'll let it play with the music, but if I can't verify, I'll just put in some of my own music over top. But in the references way down below in this video, in the description, I've got each video, and I really recommend you watch it on that person's YouTube and provide comments there as well. Okay, so some of you have asked me, Simon, I don't hear you mentioning about the R5 anymore. Are you still giving away the R5? Yes, I am. But like many of you, I've really gotten tired of mentioning it in every video, at the front of the video. So when I got the the Ninja 5 from Atomos, I realized, this is a perfect opportunity to remove the R5 mentioning there. And I will still mention it at the very end of the video when I talk about the different prize bundles leading up to 100,000. So I'm still giving it away. I'm just not going to talk about it all the time. And I think that helps us all. I don't have to say it every time. You don't have to hear it every time. And yet it's still there. So you're not going to go like, oh, he's taking it away from us, because that wouldn't be fair either. Now, in the next item of behind the scenes, the village mayor is coming up to visit tomorrow. And I'd like your input on what we should do. Now, what I was thinking of doing is doing a detailed review of the A7S III and do it in relation to the R5, because quite often when you're looking at one of these cameras, you're looking at the other. And so I thought I'd do an interview format where he would interview me based on the different capabilities that I have identified as being important. Or we could come up with something else. So I'd like your comment, what you think that me and the village mayor should do. And I'm going to invite the village mayor to be a little bit more feisty this time around and show his sense of humor, because when he's in video, he's still a little bit stiff, and I'm trying to get him to become a little bit more loose. But when I first started the videos, I was very stiff too. You got to go back and look at some of my first videos. They're hilarious. It just shows how much I've progressed. So give me your thoughts on that. And just one last thing. I'm right now at about 53 minutes. And you know what? I haven't looked at the time since I've started recording this video. Do you notice I feel a bit more relaxed? I'm not worried about overheating. I'm not worried about running out of battery. I'm not worried about record limits. I don't have to get up and change. I don't have to look at my Tascam recorder. I can just relax. I can answer the question the way I feel I need to. Last week, I felt very constrained. And, the nice thing is I can look up at the Ninja right now. I can see myself framed. I can see the time code. Now, with my eyesight, it's a little hard to see, but I can recognize roughly what the minute is. So I know I've only got about 6 minutes left before I have to get back and do my work. So there is that time limit. But still, it's like when I had the A7S III. Shooting with the A7S III, you can relax. You don't have all those limits to worry about. Now, with the Sony A7S III, the one thing I did have to worry about, though, was when I was shooting an all-eye, the cards, the 128, the 160 gig cards just weren't big enough, and that's another area where the Ninja 5 comes in. So yeah, I'm able to relax a whole lot more. But that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker once again. Don't forget to subscribe for your chance to win 2 Angelbird 128 gigabyte AV Pro MK2 V90 UHS 2 cards, along with an Angelbird UHS 2 dual SD card reader. Or you could also win a Ulanzi LED light package with accent lights, underwater light, and various flat panel lights that you can use for lighting your subject, or as a starter kit for starting your own YouTube channel. I'll be awarding these 2 prize bundles to 2 lucky viewers once the channel reaches 30,000 subscribers. And then, of course, I'll be doing other prize bundles all the way up to 100,000, just like I did here with this spring challenge, at which point I'll be giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera to 1 lucky viewer. So yes, the R5 is still being given away. I'm just not going to mention it in the front of the video anymore. Again, thank you so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. I really do appreciate your time and effort in sticking with my channel and supporting me. But now, it's time to go. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.